Hello, one and all, and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we've got another great guest for you. We have Stephanie Hickling Beckman here of Different Strokes Performing Arts Collective from Asheville to chat about her organization, what motivated her to get it started, and what is it doing for the city of Asheville. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. I see some of you people aren't watching these interviews. I get it. I mean, it can be, you really don't like the sound of my voice. That's fine. You like to hear the Movie Pope, but still show your love and support by hitting the subscribe button because we are looking to grow our audience. And the more love we get, it lets us know how we're doing and what we can do to cater the programming to your tastes. But without further ado, Stephanie, how are you doing on this fine Wednesday, the 2 days after the historic solar eclipse that we had?
Other than a little bit of laryngitis, which oddly enough was brought on during the solar eclipse, I'm doing just fine.
You know, that solar eclipse really, really does things to the body because that same day, like I started developing this really horrible migraine. And I tell you, I haven't had a migraine that bad probably since the late 90s. And I laid down, and usually I have a hard time falling asleep in the daytime or whenever it's warm. But by the time I woke up, it was already 7 o'clock because I dozed off at like 4:30, and I was like, huh, that was the best sleep ever. But then you want to know you want to know what the worst part is? The worst part is you wake up feeling refreshed, and all of a sudden your head starts to ache again, and you're like, son of a bitch. Like,
Yeah,
what the hell? and,
yeah,
and I and I popped several two ibuprofen, by the way, before all of this. So it's sort of lessened a little bit, but I'm hoping it's nothing serious. Like someone once said, if your nose starts bleeding, you have a headache, that might be a bad sign. So so far nothing's happened. Fingers crossed. But Stephanie, I came across your organization because I just found it so fascinating. I've never heard of a performing collective. Now, I've heard of a fashion collective because I interviewed Todd a few weeks ago. But a performing collective, it's kind of novel because when you think of the performing arts, everybody's kind of slotted into their own little niche. So, the dancers go into ballet or, performative dance. Artists, depending on the type, the painters usually go in one section, sculptors in another, graphic designers in another, filmmakers do their own thing, and then actors. I mean, well, the actors won't even talk to you unless you've got something coming up, and then they will beg you on their knees for a role in their film until something better comes along. But what you did, I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's taking all these seemingly disparate groups and just, well, to use a Star Trek reference, you basically founded the Federation, as it were, from these warring groups. Um, so why don't you go ahead and get us started and tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what motivated you. I think it might be on mute. I'm not hearing you.
need is what got me motivated, I believe. I moved to Asheville from Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
So let's set that up for a second. Atlanta, when I lived there in 90s, I was 85% Black, I would
And
say.
this and at that time, Atlanta, wasn't the big film hub that it is today. Okay.
Right. But we had an 85% Black population, 75 to 85, but still very, very high. Now I moved from that to Asheville, which at the time was 19%. It is much less than that now. So we have in Asheville somewhere between, I think I hear it's about 12% Black community in Asheville. But I
Hmm.
moved from one spectrum to the other. And I was used to, Asheville, Atlanta was pretty much a melting pot. But I moved here because I heard it was so diverse. And when we talk about diverse, we mean how diverse the hippies are, how long their dreads are. We're not talking about how many races exist, how many people of color are in town. So I moved here. I'm in corporate America. So I wasn't doing a lot of theater then, but doing some. So moved here and started auditioning. People move to Asheville because they want to recreate themselves. I did too. Had a bad breakup in Atlanta. I wanted to get away and be somebody new, or be the person who I always thought I was supposed to be.
Now, did you ever have any background in the arts before you moved to
I
Asheville?
did, I did in high school. I did some in college, but I concentrated primarily on business, which, as it turns out, is what has helped Different Strokes to survive to this point. But
Okay.
so I started auditioning, and in doing those auditions, there weren't many people who looked like me in the room. I'm up for these roles. And these roles weren't really about people who looked like me, but I auditioned anyway. And I would have directors actually say to me, "We would really love to cast you, but we can't match you on stage."
Now, can you elaborate what they mean by that? Because I know nowadays people kind of get up in arms whenever a person of color is cast in a role that would traditionally be seen as white. But back then, you know,
It didn't happen
yeah,
then.
African Americans. Well, I'll include myself in there because I'm Asian American. But minorities, people of color, really, were really kind of trying to fight for a spot in anything, even if it was just being in the background of a sitcom.
Exactly. So I was auditioning, but they were telling me, "We would really love to cast you, but we can't match you." And by match you, they meant there were no people that looked like you that auditioned. So we can't put you in this family, or we can't put you in this romantic role, or whatever. And so I was getting that a lot. And it was kind of discouraging. And then I finally auditioned. There was a really cool group around back then. It was called Consider the Following, and they were a lot like my collective is. They took chances, they did things differently, they thought outside the box. They wanted to really kind of explore our world and what our world looked like. So I auditioned for a play called The Children's Hour, which was about two white women who had opened up an all-girls school in New England in like the 1920s or whatever. I
Hmm.
auditioned for that play, and the director called me and said, "So I need to ask you a question. How would you feel if we offered you the part of the maid?" And I said, "I tell you, that's a little part, and that's not the part I auditioned for. And I thought my audition was better than that." So I'd be pissed off. And she said, "Thank you for saying that, because what I want to offer you is one of the lead characters, but I'm getting some pushback from my board because they're telling me that casting you in a lead role as one of these women who is traditionally been played as white would not be accepted." And she said, "And I need pushback." She said, "So I'm going to cast you." So she cast me in this play, and it was wonderful. We got audiences. I mean, it was selling out night after night. But when it got reviewed, the first thing the reviewers said was, "Imagine this, if you will, that a Black woman could be the head of an all-girls school in New England 1920s."
Now, what no, what year was this when you performed?
I did this play in two. No, I had surgery in 1999.
Okay, gotcha. So it was still that it was still that period in the performing arts where for the most part you know white actors and actresses were in the lead.
Yeah, so that was a slap in the face to me because he didn't talk about my performance. Yeah, he said a striking new face, but he didn't talk about whether my performance was good or bad. All he concentrated on in that entire review was that I was Black. He talked about an interracial relationship within the play. It didn't exist. I was a character who was supposedly in love with another character who happened to be white. It wasn't an interracial relationship as written about in the movie or in the play, but that's what he made it out to be just because of my race. So, that happened a lot. So finally, my mom is my best friend, and I talked to her about everything, and I complained to her about it. And she said, "Baby, you don't get to keep complaining if you don't do something about it."
Hmm.
And that's when I realized that just like me, that there were other people auditioning for things and weren't getting cast or weren't being considered based on their race, their size, their whatever, right? Their
Mhm.
gender, whatever. And then I went to see Billy Elliot, I think at the Fox Theater, and we sat down and ready for it to start. And there's an Asian kid that comes out, and the first thing I thought was, "Oh my God, Billy Elliot is Asian." And and then his redheaded father comes out, and his brunette mother comes out, and I'm like, "This is crazy." And then I didn't think about it anymore, because all I was seeing were these actors playing these astounding parts and doing a wonderful job at it. And that was pretty much the thing that pushed me over the edge. I thought an actor is an actor is an actor. And until we embrace that, we're not going to get better in this world. And so for me, it became a way to prove that we are more alike than we are different. And if we're going to see movies and if we're going to see plays, that's all imaginary in the first place. Why are we getting so up in arms over what the actors look like? So,
You kn Yeah, it kinda reminds me of, have you did you see that movie, The Batman? It came out a few years ago.
which one?
It was the one with Robert Pattinson.
No, I didn't see that one.
So the reason why I bring that up is because in the movie, Jeffrey Wright plays Commissioner Jim Gordon,
Okay.
and if you know anything about Batman lore, Jim Gordon's, a white guy. It's always been played by, a white actor. But but for me, it was a non-issue, because Jeffrey Wright he just worked in that role, and a part of me just kind of thought, you know what, good on him. Like, I mean, why should it matter if he's, a person of color? If he's giving the performance of a lifetime and he's making us, believe that he is Commissioner Jim Gordon, then that should be it. I mean, we really shouldn't have to harp on the fact that a black guy is playing a character that's traditionally been white. You know?
Yes, exactly. If it has nothing to do with the character itself, why does it matter? If it's not necessary for you to be a particular race, it should not matter. And that's what I've been setting out to prove with different strokes. When we first started out, I was taking actors of color and putting them in unexpected and non traditional roles. We took a play that I had loved, 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 called A Lesson Before Dying. It was
Mhm.
originally a book by Ernest Gaines. It was turned into a movie, and then it was turned into a play. But in this play, you had a young black man who was on trial for committing a crime that he did not commit. But this was in Louisiana in 1950s, so he didn't stand a chance. So he got sentenced to death. Well, he told his grandmother that because they treated him like an animal, that he was going to die like an animal. And she pretty much blackmailed the local school teacher, who was also black, into going to visit this kid every day to teach him how to be a man. So that was his lesson before dying. Well, I took this cast, which was based on the book, the way it is, and I double cast it. So we ran it in rep with all of the actors were still in both casts, but I also cast a young white man on death row with a young white teacher who was teaching him to be a man. And where it was interesting is that when the audience came to see it, when we would have our post-show discussions afterwards, excuse me, it became for the black cast, it was about race, but for the white cast, it was about class. And that started a good discussion about race. Excuse me. So we've continued that for the entire time. We have a post show discussion with our audience following each performance.
So I want to play devil's advocate here for a second, because um, because when it comes to adapting performances for a certain audience or for a certain need, there you're always going to get pushback from some people who, and you've experienced it yourself, where they say, well, that's how it's always been done. Why are you doing this? Or more from from a playwright or from a writer standpoint, you kind of have this idea that things shouldn't change because you want to remain faithful to what's in the script. I mean, how do you square that? How do you justify making these adjustments while trying to stay faithful to to the essence of the work that you're performing?
So first of all, let me say I have nothing but respect for screenwriters and playwriters. I think their work should not be, you wouldn't take a painting and take a brush and go over what somebody else has painted, right?
Right, exactly.
By that same token, I reach out to playwrights. So for all the playwrights that I've done this with, I've reached out, sent an email, had a discussion, and gotten approval to do it before I do it. And what these playwrights are interested in is to seeing their work grow. It's to seeing how different people view it. People who look differently than they do. Because when we write things, we tend to write it based on people we know, based on our own lives, not on lives we know nothing about. So for them to be given a different perspective, which I offered them, I said, how do you think this would look if this character was Black, if this character was Asian, or whatever? Do you think it would change your story? Or do you think it would make your story grow? Or do you think it would add a different perspective that you hadn't thought about?
Right, right.
And those are the playwrights that sign on for this. And now we've gone on to have playwrights. We have a playwriting division where these playwrights contact me because that's what they want to do. They want to know what it feels like to write for someone that they don't look like. We get caught up in who has the right to tell whose story. I think we all have a right to tell the story if we are committed to telling that in an authentic and a respectful way.
Now, have you ever had an instance where these playwrights are writing a work about a different experience that they know nothing about? So, say for instance, like a straight white person is writing or is asked to write a performance for someone who's trans or who's gay or who's a woman of color. Has that ever come up?
It happens all the time. And on the occasions that people have reached out to me as a playwright wanting to write these stories, my encouragement to them is you can't write this unless you're talking to the right people. So they have formed kind of a collective, so to speak, of people who can help them to understand what it is they're writing and help kind of shift whatever perspective is they're dealing with. So that's my only recommendation to them, is that they have to include the people they're writing about. You can't write about a life you don't know about in a silo. You just can't.
Right, right, and that makes sense. So I want to backtrack a little bit. So you said that the collective was started out of necessity. Can you walk me through what was it like trying to get it started in the first place, and who were the people that you reached out to, and what you did to kind of get all the resources together to create what it is today?
I hate saying this, but it was much easier than I thought it was going to be
Oh, okay.
in my mind that I wanted to do, because also while thinking about um, what races were underrepresented, we also had to think about what people were underrepresented. And although Asheville was then and still is probably considered the gay mecca, we weren't seeing a lot of plays about the gay lifestyle. We weren't seeing a lot of plays about trans people or anything. We didn't really talk a lot about it. We saw it, but we didn't talk about it. So I wanted to do a play called Love, Valor, and Compassion by Terrence McNally. It's been a movie, which is really great. Jason Alexander plays this awesome part that I actually cast a Black man in, which was really beautiful. But I wanted to do this play, and because I was an actor before I was a director or a producer, I got together a bunch of actors who I respected and said, hey, do y'all want to do this play with me? And they said, let's do it. I had an empty credit card. We did the play, and we did it as, I think I had joined, I was on the WNCAP, Western North Carolina AIDS. What's that P for? They work with people with AIDS and education and stuff like that. It's
Mhm.
called WNCAP, and they do a dinner thing every year. But anyway, I was on the board of WinCap at the time, and as a board member, we were challenged to raise $2,000 each. And I didn't have $2,000. My $2,000 was to pay my bills, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I decided was what I could do was I could put together this play and I could give the proceeds from the play to WinCap. So we made enough money to pay the credit card back and to give WinCap. I think we gave them like $3,000 instead of 2,000. So from there, I remember getting ready to give the check to the executive director at the time, and he said, "But you can't give us all $3,000. You're going to need to hold on to something for your next play." And I thought, "Oh, that makes sense. Will there be a next play? Am I going to do this thing?" And then from right there, I decided I'm going to do this thing. I didn't take the money back. He still kept it, but we used the same credit card again and put expenses for the next play on that. So we just started to do that rolling. And then because, again, I was respected in the theater community as an actor, I had a lot of people that were willing to follow me just about anywhere. And that's what we did. And because I have a background in business and business management, finances, I have been able to carry this company for 15 years. Most new companies fail within the first 5 years. But I guess I've been blessed and lucky enough to have the right people around me and to have made kind of a name for myself that it helps different strokes continue.
So, so you started off in the theater circles, based on what you're telling me about the about having all these actors and playwrights working with you. How did you how did you end up bringing in other, other performing artists into your circle?
That's been varied and under different a lot of different circumstances that we've been able to do that. But the most recent one is that I had the pleasure of watching this fantastic hip hop dancer. And I just thought he was magnificent. And there was something about me that said to him, "This kid's got a story in him. There's something else going on here, and I want to get to know him better." So what we did was we produced him and it was called Black Brilliance. We produced a hip hop show for him at Dinah Wortham and he sold it out. And that was right as we were coming back from the pandemic and we were trying to get people to come out again. So we produced this for him and gave him some exposure to the community. And now Melvin has been kicking ass all over the place. And he got hired to be on a cruise ship. He's teaching dance. He's doing all this stuff everywhere. So it's to just bring people in and shepherd them. We did also during the pandemic, we did a spoken word thing on Zoom where we had spoken word artists come in and talk about how they felt about everything that was happening with George Floyd and Philando Castile and all of them. So unarmed Black men being killed, but being able to put those feelings into their art, which was their spoken word. So it was really cool. We called it Wild Black was the name of that performance that we did. And I had maybe 6 poets, I think. So it's just been on occasion that we see the need and that there are certain voices that will speak louder in the moment. In this last play that we did, which was about women, Black women and their hair, the relationship with our hair and how our hair is part of our lives. And people don't understand the touching our hair thing and all of that.
Yeah.
It was really cool that the way the audience responded to it was great. But what I wanted to do with that, when I think about the hair salons that existed when I was a child, there were always photos of like Jet magazine models and Ebony magazine models with afros and pressed hair or whatever all over the walls in these beauty salons. But that's not what I wanted to do. There's a local painter. I mean, she is brilliant. She's self-taught and she is amazing. And we wanted to get Jenny Pickens' art on those walls instead of having magazine covers. And Jenny just does paintings with hair, all about hair. And so we were able to put her art on the walls of the salon we created on stage, and then we auctioned those off during the salon so that she could, and she got 100% of those proceeds. So it's all about helping artists for me. And I know it's Performing Arts Collective, but it's all artists, because I think that without art we'd be in much worse shape than we are as a country and as a world.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, you did mention that that you did do a showcase for a few artists during the pandemic. What was that like? Because during that period where everything was on lockdown, we saw so many theater companies and theaters kind of shutter after a few months because they weren't generating any income. How did you guys manage to survive
We
during
sh-
that period?
we shifted to Zoom. We shifted to Zoom and did other things, because it was around that time too that we started the other division of Different Strokes, which is called A Different Myth. We partnered with American Myth Center, it was another theater company, but it's run by a white man. And he said to me, I don't want to be just another white guy who owns a theater. So we combined our resources and created a playwriting resource center. So we started helping playwrights write plays, because since we couldn't produce them and put them on stage, we started to develop more Black playwrights. So we find different ways to survive, but Zoom helped us out a lot, and A Different Myth helped us out a lot. So I mean, it's like you keep your head on a swivel and you pivot every opportunity, and that's what theater is about. It's about pivoting. You're on stage and something unexpected happens, you pivot. So that's what this world is about. This life of mine, which is all about theater, is about pivoting at every opportunity that I get.
So, what would be your number one advice for anybody who is aspiring to, devote their majority of their time and energy into the performing arts and they feel discouraged?
It would be know what you want. You got to decide for yourself what your goal is. Because if you're all over the place, you're never going to hit the target. But so many people jump into this and they'll start like doing one thing, then all of a sudden, because that's not working, they do something else. If that's not working, they do something else, and then they quit because nothing is working. But the truth is, if you don't continue down that path, you're never going to know if it works or not. You're going to make mistakes, but you can't give up. And I think that's it for me. I didn't give up. Not one
Okay.
time. I had people telling me nobody wants to see these, they call them sad plays, because the plays that I produce are not only about diversity, but they're about the struggles that underrepresented people in this world have. And then we do the play and we talk about it so that we can unpack it and grow. And I had people telling me people don't want to see comedies. People don't want to see this. And I believed that at first, because after the show was over and I wanted to have my post show discussions, I'd have three people left in the audience. And then it would be like pulling teeth to get them to talk, because nobody wants to talk about race. But now I have to tell these people, all right, we got to stop. These people are trying to get out of here tonight. We got to stop so they can go, because I've got about 95% of my audiences hanging back. And everybody wants to talk, because everybody has a story and everybody wants to grow and share. So it's turned into a really beautiful thing. And I think it's only because I didn't give up.
So, so Asheville does have a reputation for being the sort of, what's the nice way of saying it, a very hippie atmosphere, very free, very open. Um, how how prominent has Different Strokes been within the artistic landscape of Asheville?
I have to say, if you ask any artist, anybody in the theater, and most people who even love theater, about Different Strokes, they will tell you that we have had some kind of influence on the type of work that they do now. And upon bringing more diversity to the stages in Asheville, when I started, I didn't see any Black people on stage. I saw no people who looked like me. Now I can't hold on to the actors I get, because they get parts in other theaters' plays. And now I'm at the point where I have to bring actors in from out of town to do my shows.
I mean, one other thing I want to ask too, because because UNCA does have does have a pretty sizable arts program. Do you collaborate with with UNCA or any other performing arts schools, or I guess schools in general in the area, to kind of cultivate and encourage the next generation of talent?
So in several ways, for the last 5 years, I have directed UNCA's fall show. That
Okay.
first show that the kids do when they come in, they spend more time with me their first 2 months at the university than they do their professors. So I consider that an honor because they apparently trust me to be some kind of good influence on them. I do some work at Ashville High. I help out in the drama classes there with with theater 1 and theater 4 classes to kind of help them, especially when we're talking about bringing more diversity and for kids of color, seeing that they can do it too. They need to see somebody doing the job so that
Mhm.
they know that they can do it. I have kids from Warren Wilson working with us. I've got kids from Mars Hill working with me. Right now, I just hired an intern who wants to learn graphic design, and she's going to learn it with me because she's going to get to design posters for us and take over social media and that kind of stuff. So it's like whatever I can do to make these kids grow in the arts, I want to do. That's a driving thing for me. So I love working with young adults.
So, another thing I want to ask too, because because I've spoken with several guests in the past who formed collectives either in fashion or in film. Do you have any plans, or are there any plans in the foreseeable future to expand, you know, the collective to not just be limited to Asheville, but to like other cities in North Carolina, like Boone, or even further out as far as Gastonia or Lincolnton or Statesville?
So we are actually the sister theater to Three Bone Theater in Charlotte.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of those guys.
I know Robin Tynes, who is the executive director, since she was 11 years old. I was like 40 then, she was 11. So she's grown up with me. And because of just we have the same philosophy of film, and she went on to create Three Bone in Charlotte. I've got young adults who have left here who worked with me that want to do the same thing wherever they are. And what I've committed to them is I will help them in whatever way possible. And that's partnerships too. I've got one woman who was here for, we did Having Our Say, which was about the Delaney sisters. Did that a few months back. And the young woman, one of the women who starred in that play, also lives in Charlotte. And now she is working with me writing a play. So, and she wants to plant that there. So I think just based on the people who come here and leave, it's a great thing. I've had a young man contact me about Different Strokes creating a touring company where we would go to places like Gastonia and other places to perform these shows because he sees the messages that we present as being something that Western North Carolina and all of North Carolina need to be exposed to.
Yeah, because when you think about it, most of the activity that you see is usually in the 85 corridor from Charlotte all the way to Raleigh.
Yeah.
So most people don't think about, oh well, maybe there's a need for it in Asheville, or a need for it in Greenville, or even a need for it in Winston Salem. So so it's really good to see that you guys are not only setting root and establishing yourselves in Asheville, but also kind of expanding your influence, as it were, to other places like Charlotte, for instance.
Yeah.
Because Three Buns a pretty recent company. That all came out like post pandemic, didn't it?
They came out pre-pandemic. Three Bone
Okay.
started. I remember I worked with Robin on her 501c3 paperwork 2 years after we started. So they've been around for a good 10 years or so, 10, 12 years. They've been around.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
weird because it's weird because they never came up in conversation before the pandemic. I only discovered them afterwards.
They
Okay.
the work that they've been doing, and I think for Robin and the other folks that kind of work as the leadership of that organization,
Hmm.
they've also started to morph post pandemic, and the work that they're doing is hands above more meaningful than some of the work that they were doing pre-pandemic. And maybe that's why, just because of the recognition that they're getting now and the outstanding work that they're doing, and maybe that's why you're hearing more about them right now.
Yeah, that's probably the reason why. Now I mentioned it before we started recording, but are there any plans, or have you made any outreaches to any film festival organizers or film production companies to kind of be a bit more inclusive with including Black filmmakers, or you know just filmmakers in general into the fold?
I would love to do that. There is a group here called Flatiron Writers Room, and they write screenplays and that kind of stuff. So it's more film oriented with what they write. But they've asked me to serve on a panel with them to just talk about where the intersection is in playwriting and filmmaking. I've done some work with over at with Mars Hill and with Western, with their film departments, where the students make the films, and done some work with them on that. So I would love it if more of them would reach out to me. Right now, most of my contacts are in theater or music or somewhere in there, but I would love to find that connection with film, and not just the personal connection, because I filmed some stuff myself, but I would love to find a way for different strokes to collaborate with film, because that could be some beautiful stuff that's created if you use both mediums and really see what it does when it collides.
Yeah, because the film medium does have such an expansive reach. I mean, whether it's on the big screen or the little screen, I mean, it's the number one way that people kind of, digest and process entertainment.
Yeah,
Um, as opposed to, way back in the day where you had to go out to a theater or to a venue and watch it being performed live on stage. So,
a lot of plays now. I went to see Romeo and Juliet in New York. It was right prior to the pandemic. And what they did with film, and that was lovely. Like, all of their set was film, where they went into New York, and like they filmed underpasses and stuff like that. And so that's what was playing behind these actors on stage. And I thought that was beautiful. They filmed a store. And then as the actors went inside the store, the camera followed the interior of the store. It was really beautiful when that gets together. So I would love to be able to do something like that. That's super creative to me.
excellent. Well, Stephanie, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the podcast, and I can't thank you enough for being such a trooper, powering through your laryngitis. So, mad respect for you. If people want to learn more about different strokes or about yourself, where can they go? How can they reach out to you or follow you?
Um, we're all over social media, and that's Different Strokes Performing Arts Collective. Just look us up on Facebook, Instagram. On X, although I don't even understand why we're still doing X. It makes no sense to me. Um, so all over the place, and our website, of course, is Different Strokes, PAC.org, as in Performing Arts Collective.
And
And
I'll put the links in the description below also, so people can check that out.
Okay. And you can, of course, Google me, and you'll see a lot of what I've done personally, and a lot of what I've done with Different Strokes that's not necessarily on the website. So it's all over the place.
Excellent. Well, Stephanie, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. But before we sign off, is there a movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you want to give a shout out to?
I'm probably gonna be really cliche with this, but I absolutely love Ted Lasso. That's my one TV show right now.
Yep.
Because I always thought, what would happen if someone took a movie or a play, and there was really no chaos in that, or there was always a good outcome without it feeling sappy. But Ted is just a really feel good show, and I think it's something we all need right now. So that's my number one.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast. And I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this episode. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and please share your love and watch every episode of the podcast, not just the reviews. Yes, the reviews are fun, but we do other things on this show as well because, well, we do want to be different. But until next time, we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you.